The cake knife was still in my hand when I realized I'd been holding my breath for 17 minutes. Not metaphorically, literally. The meditation instructor had said I'd never manage more than 5, but then again, she'd never met Diane Rothschild at a wedding reception where appearances mattered more than oxygen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Darling, you're cutting it wrong. My mother-in-law's voice sliced through the applause, sharp enough that 3 people near the dessert table actually flinched. The blade goes perpendicular to the tier. Perpendicular. Surely even someone from your background knows basic geometry. Marcus squeezed my hand, his touch apologetic. 200 guests watched us like we were Exhibit A in a museum of matrimonial mistakes. I exhaled slowly, the 17-minute breath escaping in a controlled stream that fogged the silver blade. Of course, I murmured, adjusting my angle. Thank you, Diane. She winced at the informality. Mrs. Rothschild, her expression corrected silently. Always Mrs. Rothschild. Never Mom. Certainly never family. The 5-tier monstrosity before us had cost more than my childhood home. White fondant roses cascaded down its sides, each petal hand-sculpted by a pastry chef Diane had flown in from Lyon. The top tier showcased our initials in gold leaf. M and V intertwined in a script so elaborate it looked like a DNA strand. V for Vanessa. V for very much not what Diane had envisioned for her only son. I still think buttercream would have been more appropriate for a second marriage, Diane continued, adjusting one of the sugar flowers with her manicured nail. Fondant suggests a certain permanence. That might be premature. This wasn't Marcus's second marriage. It was mine. Diane made sure everyone knew it. The photographer circled us like a shark, camera clicking. Smile, his assistant had instructed earlier. Natural. In love. As if love could survive being dissected under Diane's microscope for the past 18 months. Mom, Marcus said quietly, a warning in his tone that we both knew he'd never enforce. Please, I'm simply trying to help. Diane stepped back, smoothing her silver Chanel suit. Someone has to maintain standards. Heaven knows she won't. She. Always she. Never Vanessa, despite the nameplate on my desk at Harrington & Associates. Despite my face on the firm's website, despite the fact that I'd just married her son. I pressed the knife through buttercream and sponge, feeling $300 worth of French pastry yield beneath the blade. The crowd applauded dutifully. Someone's uncle whistled. Marcus lifted our joined hands to his lips, and for a moment, I almost forgot the previous 17 minutes and the ones before that. Almost. The groom may now feed the bride, the wedding coordinator announced. Her voice pitched to reach the back of the ballroom. Marcus carefully balanced a piece of cake on a silver fork, his hazel eyes meeting mine with an apology that had become our marriage's native language. I opened my mouth, tasted almond and vanilla, and the bitter aftertaste of Diane's disapproval. My turn. I lifted a piece toward Marcus's lips, and Diane's hand shot out. Not so much, she instructed, physically reducing the portion on my fork. Marcus is watching his figure. The firm's annual portrait is next month. The firm. Rothschild Capital Management. Where Marcus served as CFO under his father's watchful eye, where every quarterly meeting came with a side of family dysfunction, where I would never be invited despite my own credentials in corporate law. Vanessa could advise on the fiscal restructuring, Marcus had suggested once at a family dinner. She handles mergers twice this size. Diane had smiled then, the kind of smile that preceded arterial bleeding. I'm sure she's very competent at whatever it is she does. But Rothschild Capital maintains certain standards for consultation. We simply couldn't risk our reputation on someone so unestablished. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Unestablished. I'd made junior partner at 29. I'd closed the Templeton merger that made national news. I'd been profiled in Forbes as one of 30 under 30 to watch. but to Diane, I would always be unestablished, unproven, unsuitable. The cake-cutting photo op concluded, and guests returned to their conversations. The band struck up again, something jazzy and expensive. Diane disappeared into the crowd, probably to inform someone else about my inadequacies. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, pulling me close for what was meant to look like a romantic moment. She doesn't mean it, but she did. That was the problem. Diane meant every word with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "It's fine," I lied. The same lie I'd been telling since the day Marcus brought me home to meet his family. The day Diane's smile had frozen when she realized I wasn't Amanda Westbrook from the yacht club, or Catherine Pierce from the Historical Society, or any of the other suitably pedigreed women she'd been parading past Marcus for years. I was just Vanessa Chen, daughter of immigrants, first-generation college graduate. Someone who'd clawed her way up from a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens to a corner office in Manhattan through nothing but brutal work ethic and refusal to quit. Someone not good enough. "Dance with me," Marcus said, leading me toward the floor where other couples swayed to music that cost more per minute than most people's car payments. I let him guide me, his hand warm on my back, and tried to ignore Diane watching from her table like a hawk tracking prey. Her friends clustered around her, women in designer gowns with hyphenated last names and vacation homes in the Hamptons. They whispered behind champagne flutes, their eyes flickering toward me with assessment. "She's lovely," one of them said, loud enough for me to hear. "Such an interesting choice. Interesting. Code for unsuitable. Code for not one of us. Marcus could have had anyone," another voice added. "Catherine Pierce is still single, you know. And she actually understands the social obligations of the position. Position. As if being married to Marcus was a job with a description and requirements." The song ended, and Marcus was immediately pulled away by his college roommate for some congratulatory backslapping. I stood alone in the center of the dance floor, suddenly visible in my isolation. The crowd seemed to part around me, creating a buffer zone of rejection. Vanessa. My best friend Riley appeared with 2 champagne flutes, pressing one into my hand. "You look like you need this." I drank deeply, letting the bubbles burn down my throat. Riley had been my roommate in law school, my study partner, my witness to every late night and early morning that built my career. She understood ambition in a way Marcus's crowd never would. "She actually told Aunt Margaret that you don't know how to properly set a table," Riley reported, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "Can you believe that? She's literally inventing things to criticize." "I'm sure I did something wrong at the rehearsal dinner," I said, already running through the evening's events, searching for my mistakes. "Had I used the wrong fork? Laughed too loud? Existed too obviously? Stop that!" Riley gripped my arm. "You did nothing wrong. She's the problem, not you. But in this world, surrounded by old money and older traditions, I was always the problem. The variable that didn't fit the equation. The anomaly that disrupted their perfect system. Mrs. Rothschild would like to see you." A young woman in catering blacks appeared at my elbow, her expression carefully neutral. "In the library?" She said. "It's urgent." My stomach dropped. Nothing good happened in private conversations with Diane, but refusing would create a scene. And scene avoidance was the only rule I'd successfully followed in this family. "I'll come with you," Riley said immediately. "No," I squeezed her hand. "Stay. Enjoy the overpriced food. I'll be fine." The library was off the main ballroom, a wood-paneled sanctuary that the venue used for private meetings. Diane stood by the window, backlit by the New York skyline, looking like she'd been positioned by a cinematographer for maximum dramatic impact. "Close the door," she instructed without turning. I complied, my wedding dress rustling against the floor. $3,000 of silk and lace that Diane had called a bit much for someone in your position. I'd worn it anyway. A small rebellion that now felt hollow. "I want to be clear about something." Diane finally turned, her face cast in shadows that made her seem older, harder. "You've married my son. I cannot change that. But I can make certain you understand the expectations." I love Marcus, I said, though the words felt inadequate, like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Love. She smiled, that surgical smile again. How charmingly naive. Love is what college students feel. Marriage in families like ours is about legacy, position, and proper breeding. Breeding. Like we were discussing thoroughbred horses instead of human beings. Marcus chose me, I said, forcing strength into my voice. He loves me. Marcus chose rebellion, Diane corrected. He chose to hurt me after I expressed concerns about that technology investment. This marriage is his tantrum made legal. But tantrums end, Vanessa. And when this one does, I want you to understand something very clearly. She moved closer, and I caught her perfume. Chanel No. 5, the same scent my mother saved for months to buy one bottle of, wearing it only on special occasions. Diane probably went through a bottle weekly. You will never be part of this family, she said, each word precise and cutting. You can change your name, attend our functions, play dress-up in expensive clothes. But you will always be exactly what you are, an outsider. Not good enough. Not suitable. Not one of us. The words should have hurt. Maybe they did. But I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. Not smart enough for that scholarship. Not experienced enough for that position. Not qualified enough for that promotion. I'd proven every single one of them wrong. Are you finished? I asked quietly. Diane's eyes narrowed. I've arranged for an account to be opened in your name. $50,000 monthly. Consider it a stipend for maintaining appropriate appearances. You'll need a new wardrobe, proper jewelry, and lessons in etiquette. I've already contacted several image consultants. I don't want your money. Don't be absurd. Of course you do. Why else would someone like you marry into a family like ours? The accusation hung in the air between us, poisonous and practiced. Gold digger. She didn't say it, but the implication wrapped around every syllable. I have my own career, I said, my jaw tight. I make my own money. I don't need yours. That little law firm? Diane laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Playing lawyer in some boutique practice? That's charming, dear. Truly. But let's not pretend it compares to Rothschild Capital. The sooner you accept your place, the easier this will be for everyone. My phone buzzed in the small clutch I'd carried down the aisle. I glanced at the screen, expecting Riley checking on me. Instead, I saw an unknown number and a message that made my blood run cold. Is this Vanessa Chen Rothschild? This is Gerald Whitmore, chairman of the board at Rothschild Capital. We need to speak immediately. It's regarding your mother-in-law's position. I stared at the words, reading them 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. Gerald Whitmore, the man who'd founded Rothschild Capital with Diane's late husband 40 years ago. The silent partner who rarely involved himself in company affairs. The legend who made presidents nervous. What is it? Diane demanded, noticing my expression. Nothing, I said, sliding the phone back into my clutch. Just work. Work, she scoffed. On your wedding day. How perfectly common. But her insult barely registered. My mind was racing through possibilities, scenarios, implications. Why would Gerald Whitmore contact me? How did he even have my personal number? And what did he mean by Diane's position? I should get back to the reception, I said, moving toward the door. We're not finished. Actually, we are. I turned back, meeting her gaze directly for the first time since I'd entered the room. You've made your position clear, Diane. You think I'm not good enough. You think I'm an outsider. You think I don't belong in your world. Fine. Think whatever you want. But I married Marcus because I love him. Not because I give a damn about your approval or your money or your perfect little dynasty. Her face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me that way? It's my wedding day, I said, opening the door. I'll speak however I want. I walked out before she could respond, my heart pounding with adrenaline and something else. Something dangerous and electric that I hadn't felt since the day I'd stood up to a senior partner who'd tried to steal credit for my work. The reception continued in full swing. Marcus was at his table, laughing with friends. Riley was dancing with one of the groomsmen. No one had noticed my absence or my return. I was invisible even at my own wedding, a ghost haunting someone else's celebration. I found a quiet corner near the terrace doors and pulled out my phone, hands trembling slightly as I dialed the number Gerald Whitmore had provided. He answered on the first ring. Ms. Chen. Thank you for calling back so promptly. His voice was rough, aged, commanding. I apologize for the intrusion on your wedding day, but this matter requires immediate attention. Mr. Whitmore, I don't understand. How did you get my number? And why would you need to speak with me about Diane's position? A pause. In the background, I heard papers rustling. Because as of 48 hours ago, I became aware of certain irregularities in Mrs. Rothschild's management of company funds. I've spent the last 2 days conducting a discreet investigation. The findings are quite troubling. My legal training kicked in immediately. What kind of irregularities? The kind that typically result in federal investigations, Ms. Chen. I've reviewed your professional record. Harrington and Associates. The Templeton merger. Your work on the Sanderson fraud case. You have expertise in exactly the areas I require assistance with. I'm Marcus's wife, I said slowly, my mind already mapping the complications. There would be conflicts of interest, ethical concerns. There would be justice, Gerald corrected. Diane Rothschild has been systematically diverting company funds for personal use. Shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified expense reports. Over the past 5 years, she's embezzled approximately $47 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $47 million. While she criticized my department store wedding dress and called me a gold digger, Diane had been stealing enough money to fund a small country. Why me? I asked. Why not use Rothschild Capital's legal team? Because she controls that team, Gerald said bluntly. Because I need someone with no loyalty to her, no fear of her influence, and the skill to build an airtight case. Someone she's underestimated completely. From what I understand, Ms. Chen, Diane has spent considerable energy making you feel inadequate and unsuitable. I'm offering you the opportunity to prove otherwise. Through the terrace doors, I could see Diane holding court with her circle, her laughter carrying across the ballroom. She caught my eye and raised her champagne flute in a mock toast, that surgical smile firmly in place. I'll need complete access to company records, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Financial statements, expense reports, bank account information, everything. You'll have it by Monday morning. Can you meet me at my office? Say 8 a.m.? I'll be there. One more thing, Ms. Chen. Gerald's voice lowered. Diane cannot know about this investigation. Not yet. Can you maintain that discretion? I looked at my mother-in-law, surrounded by people who thought I wasn't good enough, holding court at my wedding reception like it was her personal stage. I thought about every cutting remark, every subtle insult, every moment she'd made me feel small and inferior and wrong. I can be very discreet, I said. Excellent. Welcome to Rothschild Capital, Ms. Chen, though not in the capacity your mother-in-law expected. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my clutch. My hands were steady now, my heartbeat returning to normal. Across the ballroom, Marcus waved me over, his smile genuine and warm. I started toward him, past Diane's table, past her friends and their whispered assessments. Leaving so soon? Diane called out as I passed. The bride really should stay until the end. Though I suppose you're tired. This world must be so exhausting when you're not born to it. I paused, turning to face her. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, to swallow the insult, to be the bigger person. But something had shifted in that phone call with Gerald Whitmore. Some fundamental reordering of power that Diane hadn't yet sensed. Actually, Diane, I said, keeping my voice pleasant and professional, I'm not tired at all. In fact, I'm just getting started. Her eyes narrowed slightly, picking up on some undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. Getting started with what, dear? With being part of this family, I smiled. Whether you think I'm good enough or not. I walked away before she could respond, joining Marcus at his table. He pulled me onto his lap, kissing my temple, oblivious to the war that had just been declared in the space between his mother's table and his own. Having fun? He asked, his breath warm against my ear. More than you know, I said, meaning it completely. Riley caught my eye from across the room, concern etched on her face. I gave her a small nod, a signal that I was okay, that whatever had happened in the library hadn't broken me. She relaxed slightly, raising her glass in a silent toast. The band played on. Couples danced. Diane held court with her perfectly coiffed friends, secure in her position, confident in her power. She had no idea that her newest family member, the one she'd deemed not good enough, was already building the case that would end her reign. Monday morning would bring revelations. But tonight, I danced with my husband at our wedding reception, counting down the hours until I could start dismantling my mother-in-law's empire with the same precision she'd used to try to dismantle my confidence. After all, she'd taught me an important lesson. In this world, appearances were everything, and I was about to become very good at maintaining them while the foundations crumbled underneath. The reception finally wound down around midnight. Guests filed out with their party favors, expensive chocolates in boxes embossed with our initials. Diane made a grand exit, kissing Marcus on both cheeks while pointedly ignoring me entirely. Her final words were for her son alone, whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Call me tomorrow, darling. We need to discuss your future at the firm. Without distractions." Distractions. That's what I'd become. A distraction from the legacy, the dynasty, the perfect life Diane had scripted for her son. Marcus and I retreated to the honeymoon suite the venue provided, a palatial room overlooking Central Park. He loosened his tie with a sigh of relief, looking younger suddenly, less like the CFO of a major investment firm and more like the man I'd fallen in love with 2 years ago. "I'm sorry about her," he said, not for the first time that day. "She'll warm up to you eventually. She just needs time." I thought about the $47 million, the shell companies, the systematic fraud. "I'm sure she will," I lied. But as Marcus fell asleep beside me, exhausted from the day's performance, I lay awake, my mind already working through the case. I'd need to review 5 years of financial records, trace the shell companies, follow the money trail from Rothschild Capital through whatever Byzantine network Diane had constructed, build a case so airtight that not even her expensive lawyers could find a crack. My phone glowed on the nightstand. A new message from Gerald Whitmore. Preliminary documents attached. Review when possible. Meeting Monday 8 a.m. confirmed. Office address 450 Park Avenue, 40th floor. Use the private elevator. Security will be expecting you. GW. I opened the attachments with trembling fingers. Financial statements. Bank records. Expense reports spanning 5 years. Even in the dim light from my phone, I could see irregularities jumping off the page. Money flowing to companies with vague names. Consulting fees that never produced consultants. Business expenses for properties that didn't exist. Diane had been sloppy, arrogant. Secure in her position and her power, she'd stopped being careful. The same arrogance that made her think she could openly insult me at my own wedding had made her careless with her crimes. I downloaded everything to an encrypted folder on my phone, then deleted the messages. Tomorrow, I'd transfer them to my work computer, segment them into categories, begin the methodical process of building an investigation. But tonight, lying next to my sleeping husband in our honeymoon suite, I allowed myself one moment of vindictive satisfaction. Not good enough. Unsuitable. Not one of us. We'd see about that. Through the window, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, all lights and connections and power flowing through invisible channels. Somewhere out there, Diane was probably already planning her next move, her next subtle insult, her next reminder that I didn't belong. She had no idea I was planning too. The sky was beginning to lighten when I finally fell asleep, my dreams full of spreadsheets and courtrooms and the look on Diane's face when she realized exactly how not good enough I really was. Monday arrived faster than I expected. The weekend had been a blur of thank you notes and gift cataloging and playing the role of grateful bride. Marcus had left for work early, some emergency meeting his father had called. I'd dressed carefully in a navy Tom Ford suit I'd bought with my own money, paired with the pearl earrings my mother had given me when I made partner. For important moments, she'd said in Mandarin, pressing them into my palm. When you need to remember who you are. I needed to remember today. Gerald Whitmore's office was everything you'd expect from a founding partner of a major investment firm. Corner suite, panoramic views, art that probably cost more than my annual salary. But the man himself was a surprise. Small, slight, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked like someone's grandfather, right up until you met his gaze and realized this was a man who'd built an empire. Ms. Chen. He rose from behind his desk, offering his hand. Thank you for coming. I trust you had a chance to review the preliminary documents? I did. I sat in the chair he indicated, pulling out my tablet. The irregularities are extensive. She's created a network of shell companies, each one serving a different purpose in the fraud. The money flows through at least 7 different accounts before landing in what I assume are her personal holdings. Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly. You determined all that from preliminary documents? The pattern is clear once you know what to look for. She's been running a version of the pyramid scheme, but instead of recruiting new investors, she's recruiting new shell companies to obscure the flow. It's sophisticated but not invisible. She got lazy around year 3, started using the same registered agent for multiple companies. That's your weak point. And your recommendation? I pulled up my notes, the analysis I'd compiled over the weekend while Marcus thought I was addressing wedding invitations. We build the case methodically. Start with the most recent fiscal year, establish the pattern, then work backward. Request forensic audits of all companies she's affiliated with, subpoena bank records, interview employees who processed her expense reports. By the time we're done, we'll have enough evidence to ensure criminal prosecution, not just civil penalties. Gerald leaned back in his chair, studying me. You understand this will destroy your mother-in-law's life. I understand this will hold her accountable for crimes she committed. And your husband? Marcus will be caught in the crossfire. That was the part that kept me awake at night, the complication that made this more than just a professional case. Marcus deserves to know the truth about his mother. He deserves to work at a firm that isn't being systematically defrauded. And he deserves better than a mother who's stealing from the legacy his father built. His father knew, Gerald said quietly. The words hit me like cold water. What? Richard Rothschild. Marcus's father. My former partner. Gerald's voice was heavy with old pain. He discovered the fraud about 6 months before he died. The heart attack everyone attributed to stress? He was preparing to confront Diane. I found his notes in his personal safe after the funeral. I should have acted then, but I was grieving, and I convinced myself I was wrong. That Richard had made mistakes in his investigation, that Diane wouldn't do something so brazen, but she did. She did, and she's been doing it ever since, growing bolder with each passing year. The woman has stolen from her dead husband's legacy, from her son's inheritance, from every employee who trusted this firm. And she did it all while playing the grieving widow and devoted mother. I thought about Marcus's father, the photos throughout their home. Richard Rothschild had died of a heart attack 5 years ago. Stress-related, the doctors said. But now I wondered, had discovering his wife's betrayal literally broken his heart? I'll need full access, I said, forcing my focus back to the case. Everything. No restrictions. And I'll need it without Diane knowing I'm investigating. You'll have it. I've already arranged for you to be brought on as a special consultant. Corporate compliance review. Diane knows we do them periodically. She won't be surprised. She'll be suspicious if I'm the one conducting it. Not if she thinks you're failing. Gerald smiled slightly. I'll make sure she believes I've assigned you busy work. Meaningless compliance checks that go nowhere. Let her think I've given her daughter-in-law a token position to keep the family happy. By the time she realizes what you're actually doing, it will be too late. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Diane's prejudice against me as camouflage. Let her think I was too incompetent to find what was hidden in plain sight. Strike only when the case was unassailable. There's one more thing, Gerald said, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. This firm has a board of directors. 5 members, including Diane. I need 3 votes to remove her from any position of authority. I have my own vote, obviously. But I'll need to convince at least 2 others that action is necessary. That means building a case so strong, so irrefutable, that they'll have no choice but to act. Who are the other board members? He slid the folder across his desk. Inside were dossiers on 4 people. Martin Hughes, retired federal judge. He values evidence and protocol above all else. Sarah Lancaster, former prosecutor. She'll want to see criminal intent clearly demonstrated. Robert Chen, no relation to you, I assume. Tech entrepreneur who values innovation and despises waste. And Diane herself, of course. I studied the profiles, my mind already strategizing approaches. Martin Hughes is your first target. If we can get a retired judge to agree the evidence supports action, the others will follow. Sarah Lancaster will be easier once we've established clear criminal intent. Robert Chen will care about the impact on company performance and reputation. You've done this before. Building consensus for difficult decisions? It's half of what I do at Harrington and Associates. The other half is finding the evidence to support those decisions. Gerald stood, moving to the window. Your mother-in-law called you not good enough. I'm beginning to think you're exactly good enough. Perhaps too good for this family. With respect, Mr. Whitmore, I didn't marry the family. I married Marcus, and he deserves better than what his mother has built. Then let's give it to him. Gerald turned back from the window. Your office is 3 doors down. Private space, dedicated computer terminal with full access to company servers. My assistant will provide you with security credentials and access codes. Officially, you're conducting a standard compliance review. Unofficially, you're building the case that will end Diane Rothschild's criminal enterprise. I stood, gathering my things. How long do I have? As long as it takes to do it right. But Miss Chen? Gerald's expression turned serious. Diane Rothschild is not someone who accepts defeat gracefully. She'll fight. She'll threaten. She'll try to turn her son against you. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the wedding reception, about Diane's whispered insults and public humiliations, about the way she'd tried to make me feel small and insufficient and wrong, about the stipend she'd offered like I was a charity case instead of a woman who'd built her own career through merit and hard work. I'm prepared, I said, and I was. Because Diane Rothschild had made one critical mistake in her assessment of me. She'd assumed that not being born to wealth meant not understanding how wealth worked. That coming from nothing meant accepting whatever scraps I was thrown. She'd forgotten that people who build themselves from nothing learn to be ruthless in ways old. Money never has to imagine. My new office was smaller than Gerald's but still impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Park Avenue. A desk that could have landed a small plane. And most importantly, a computer terminal with access to every financial record Rothschild Capital had generated in the past decade. I spent the first hour simply mapping the network, understanding how money flowed through the company, identifying normal patterns versus aberrations. Diane's fraud was sophisticated but not invisible. She'd created a constellation of shell companies with innocuous names: Strategic Consulting Partners, Executive Advisory Solutions, Global Management Resources, each one billing Rothschild Capital for services that were never actually rendered. The money would flow from Rothschild Capital to these shell companies, then disappear into offshore accounts. But Diane had gotten sloppy. She'd used the same registered agent, the same offshore bank, the same patterns of billing that, once you knew what to look for, stood out like neon signs. My phone buzzed. Marcus calling. Hey, I answered, keeping my voice casual. How's your day? Weird, actually. Mom mentioned you're doing some compliance work for the firm. Since when? Since your mother stole $47 million and I'm building the case to prove it, I thought. Gerald Whitmore asked if I'd review some protocols. Just standard stuff. I can do it remotely, so it won't interfere with my work at Harrington. That's amazing. Marcus's enthusiasm was genuine. See, I told you Mom would come around. She must have recommended you to Gerald. I closed my eyes, hating the lie but knowing it was necessary. Yeah, maybe she's warming up to me. I'm so glad. This is great, Vanessa. Really great. We can talk about work over dinner, compare notes on our days. Can't wait, I said, meaning something entirely different than he thought. After we hung up, I returned to the financial records, tracing one particular shell company called Premier Advisory Group. It had billed Rothschild Capital for $2.3 million in consulting fees over the past 18 months. But when I pulled the company registration, I found something interesting. The registered agent was a P.O. box in Delaware. The listed director was someone named Patricia Morrison. Morrison. Diane's maiden name. I pulled up property records next. Patricia Morrison owned a beach house in the Hamptons, purchased 18 months ago for $2.1 million in cash. The same amount Premier Advisory Group had billed Rothschild Capital, minus exactly enough for closing costs and furnishings. There it was. A direct line from company funds to personal property, not hidden through layers of transactions and offshore accounts, but barely concealed at all. Diane had grown so confident in her untouchability that she'd stopped bothering to truly hide the theft. I documented everything, building a digital trail that even the most expensive defense attorney couldn't explain away. By 5 p.m., I had mapped 12 shell companies, traced approximately $19 million in fraudulent billing, and identified 6 properties that had been purchased with what I was certain was embezzled money. Burning the midnight oil, Gerald appeared in my doorway, his expression pleased. "Find anything interesting?" Diane Rothschild is either the worst criminal I've ever seen or the most arrogant. She's barely hiding the fraud. It's like she thinks no one would dare look. "That's exactly what she thinks," Gerald said quietly. "Because for 5 years no one has. The auditors report to her. The financial controls she's supposed to oversee? She oversees them. She's created a system where she's simultaneously the guardian and the thief." "Not anymore," I said, pulling up my master document. "I have enough here to present to Martin Hughes tomorrow if you wanted. This alone would be sufficient to start criminal proceedings. Tomorrow is too soon. We need everything. Every transaction, every shell company, every dollar she's stolen. When we move against Diane Rothschild, it needs to be with such overwhelming evidence that surrender is her only option." I understood. This wasn't just about proving fraud. It was about preventing any possibility of Diane fighting back, dragging the company through public scandal, or worse, winning. "I'll keep building the case," I said. "But Mr. Whitmore? She's going to notice eventually. Someone will mention seeing me in the building. Someone will ask questions about my access to financial records. We need to be ready for when that happens. Let me worry about that. You focus on the evidence." I worked until 8 p.m., then packed up my laptop and headed home. Marcus would be wondering where I was. I told him I had some catch-up work at Harrington, which wasn't entirely a lie. I did have cases waiting. They just weren't my priority right now. The apartment was dark when I arrived. Our apartment. Still strange to think of it that way. We'd only moved in together 3 months ago, combining his Upper East Side space with my more modest Hell's Kitchen studio. The result was his apartment with some of my things awkwardly fitted into corners. "Vanessa?" Marcus called from the bedroom. "That you?" "Yeah, sorry I'm late." Case ran long. He appeared in the doorway, already changed into sweatpants and a Columbia t-shirt. This was my favorite version of Marcus. Not the polished CFO in Tom Ford suits, but the man who still wore his college shirts and made terrible puns and forgot to close cabinet doors. "You hungry? I ordered Thai from that place you like." My stomach rumbled in response. I'd forgotten to eat lunch, too absorbed in tracking Diane's financial crimes. "Starving. Thank you." We ate on the couch, watching some cooking competition show Marcus was obsessed with. Normal, domestic, the kind of evening I'd imagined when I said yes to his proposal. But every few minutes my mind drifted back to the evidence on my laptop. The shell companies. The offshore accounts, the systematic theft that had been happening right under everyone's noses. "Mom called," Marcus said during a commercial break. "She wants us to come to dinner on Sunday." The whole family. Kind of a post-wedding gathering. I nearly choked on my pad thai. "This Sunday?" I know it's short notice, but she seemed really excited about it. "Said she wants to make more of an effort with you." "Start fresh." He squeezed my hand. "See? I told you she'd come around. Start fresh. Or more likely, start establishing her narrative before I could build my case." Diane might not know I was investigating her, but she was smart enough to sense something had shifted. Gerald Whitmore reaching out to me, offering me access to the firm. She'd want to control that situation. Of course, I heard myself say. Sunday sounds great. Marcus kissed my temple. Thank you for trying with her. I know she can be difficult, but she's my mom, you know. She's all I have left of my dad. Guilt twisted in my stomach. Marcus had no idea what his mother really was. What she'd done to his father's legacy. How she'd been systematically stealing from the company Richard Rothschild had spent his life building. I know, I said softly. I'll try. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I retrieved my laptop and returned to work. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I pulled up the files Gerald had sent, cross-referencing them with public records, SEC filings, property databases. Each new connection I found tightened the net around Diane, a consulting company that existed only on paper, an advisory firm whose only client was Rothschild Capital, a management group that had never managed anything but funneling money into Diane's personal accounts. By 3 a.m., I'd documented 32 separate instances of fraud. By 4, I'd traced the money through 7 different countries. By 5, when the sky outside began to lighten, I'd built a timeline showing exactly when each theft occurred, how much was stolen, and where it ended up. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, devastating. I thought about Sunday dinner, about sitting across from Diane while she smiled her surgical smile and made her cutting remarks, about playing the role of grateful daughter-in-law while knowing exactly what she was. My phone buzzed. A message from Gerald Whitmore sent at 5:47 a.m., early morning or late night. Either way, I'm impressed. Review the Anderson file when you have time. I think you'll find it illuminating. GW the Anderson file. I pulled it up, scanning quickly through what appeared to be personnel records. Thomas Anderson, former comptroller at Rothschild Capital, fired 3 years ago for alleged embezzlement of company funds. According to the official record, he'd stolen approximately $300,000 through falsified expense reports. But as I dug deeper, something felt wrong. The evidence against Anderson was thin. A few suspicious transactions, some paperwork irregularities. Nothing like the systematic fraud I was uncovering with Diane. And the investigating team that had built the case against him? All people who reported directly to Diane. I pulled up news articles from the time. Thomas Anderson had maintained his innocence throughout. He'd claimed he was being framed, that someone else had accessed his accounts, that the real thief was still at the company. No one believed him. He'd been convicted, served 18 months in federal prison, and his career had been destroyed. My stomach turned as the implication became clear. Diane hadn't just been stealing from the company. She'd been framing others to cover her tracks, creating scapegoats who took the fall while she continued her systematic theft. I sent a message back to Gerald. How many others? His response came immediately. 3 that I know of. Anderson was just the most recent. The others settled quietly, signed NDAs in exchange for dropped charges. I can provide their information if needed. 3 other people. 3 other lives destroyed because Diane needed to protect her criminal enterprise. 3 other families who'd suffered while she played the respectable widow and devoted mother. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was a pattern of deliberate cruelty and calculated destruction that went beyond simple theft. Diane had weaponized the company, using it to ruin anyone who got close to discovering her crimes. I thought about Marcus sleeping in the next room. About how he'd defend his mother if I told him what I'd found. About how family loyalty would war with evidence, and how much it would hurt him to learn the truth. But he deserved to know. They all deserved to know. And those 3 people who'd been framed deserved vindication. I worked through the morning, building a secondary case file focused on the wrongful terminations and false accusations. By the time Marcus woke up at 7, I had documentation showing how each person had been systematically set up, their careers destroyed to protect Diane's secrets. You're up early, Marcus said, finding me still on the couch with my laptop. Did you sleep at all? A little. I closed the computer, rubbing my eyes. Just wanted to get ahead on some work. He frowned, concerned. You've been working a lot lately? Even for you. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Just a big case. You know how it is. But he didn't know. Couldn't know, not yet. Not until I had everything documented, every avenue of defense closed, every piece of evidence so solid that even Diane's expensive lawyers couldn't create reasonable doubt. Coffee? Marcus offered, already moving toward the kitchen. Please. While he made coffee, I opened my regular work email. 17 new messages from Harrington and Associates. Cases that needed attention. Clients who needed calls. The job I was supposed to be doing while secretly investigating my mother-in-law for massive corporate fraud. Riley had sent a message. Drinks tonight? Need to catch up. You've been MIA since the wedding. I typed back. Can't tonight. Maybe Thursday? Her response was immediate. Is everything okay? You seem off. Just busy. I'll explain Thursday. The coffee Marcus handed me was perfect. He knew exactly how I liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream in the oversized mug I preferred. These small acts of knowing me, of caring about details, reminded me why I'd fallen for him in the first place. I have to head into the office early, he said, checking his phone. Dad's estate lawyers want to review some trust documents. Apparently there's a distribution issue. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was already working. Richard Rothschild's estate. Trust distributions. Another potential avenue where Diane might have manipulated funds. Want me to take a look? I offered casually. I handle estate law sometimes. Nah, it's probably just administrative stuff. But thanks. He kissed me quickly. See you tonight? See you tonight. After he left, I immediately called Gerald Whitmore. Ms. Chen, you're keeping the same hours I do. Marcus just mentioned estate lawyers reviewing his father's trust. Distribution issues. Is that connected to the investigation? A pause. Perceptive. Yes, Richard's estate was quite substantial. The trust was set up to distribute funds to Marcus on a timed schedule. But certain distributions have been delayed or reduced. I've been reviewing the trust administration, and I believe Diane may have been diverting those funds as well. She's stealing from her own son's inheritance? It appears so, but proving it will be delicate. The trust documents are complex, and she's the primary trustee. She has significant discretion over distributions. Not if we can show she's been misusing that discretion for personal benefit. Get me copies of the trust documents, all distribution records, and her financial disclosures as trustee. If she's stealing from Marcus, that's a breach of fiduciary duty on top of everything else. I'll have them sent over. Ms. Chen, you realize you're building a case that will likely send your mother-in-law to federal prison. I thought about Thomas Anderson and the 3 others whose lives she'd destroyed. About Marcus, who deserved to know the truth even if it hurt. About my own wedding reception, where she'd called me not good enough while stealing millions. I'm building a case that will hold her accountable for crimes she committed, I said. Whether that leads to prison is up to the courts. I spent Tuesday at my actual office, trying to catch up on legitimate work while my mind kept drifting back to Rothschild Capital. My paralegal David noticed immediately. You okay, boss? You've been staring at that deposition summary for 20 minutes without turning the page. Just distracted. Sorry. I forced myself to focus, to read the words in front of me, to care about the patent dispute I was supposed to be preparing for trial. But it was like trying to concentrate on a crossword puzzle when you knew there was a bomb ticking in the next room. Every minute I spent on normal work felt like a minute wasted, time Diane could use to cover her tracks or create new scapegoats. Riley's here, David announced at lunchtime. She says you're not allowed to skip out on her again. Riley appeared in my doorway holding 2 salads from the place around the corner. Lunch, now, non-negotiable. We ate in my office with the door closed. Riley studied me with the intensity she usually reserved for hostile witnesses. Okay, spill. What's going on? And don't say work, because I know your work face, and this isn't it, I wanted to tell her. Riley had been my confidant through every major life event for the past 8 years. But the investigation required absolute secrecy. The fewer people who knew, the less chance of Diane finding out before we were ready. "I can't talk about it yet," I said finally. "But I will, soon, I promise." "Is it Marcus? Is he okay?" "Marcus is fine. It's not about him." "Not exactly." "His mother, then?" Riley's expression darkened. "What did that witch do now?" "Riley, no, I'm serious. She was horrible to you at the wedding. Everyone saw it. If she's continuing that behavior, you need to shut it down. You're part of that family now, whether she likes it or not." "I'm handling it," I said, meaning it in ways Riley couldn't imagine. "Trust me." She studied me a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm here when you're ready to talk. Whatever this is, you don't have to handle it alone." But I did have to handle it alone. Or rather, with Gerald Whitmore and the evidence I was compiling. Because bringing others in meant more risk, more chances for Diane to discover what was coming. Wednesday brought a breakthrough. I was reviewing Diane's personal banking records when I noticed a pattern. Every month, like clockwork, she transferred exactly $15,000 from one of her hidden accounts to a personal checking account under the name Diane Morrison Rothschild. 15,000. 12 times a year, $180,000 annually in what appeared to be salary payments to herself from her own shell company. But Rothschild Capital already paid Diane a substantial salary as COO. These additional payments weren't disclosed on any tax returns or financial statements I could find. Which meant not only was she stealing from the company, she was evading taxes on the stolen funds. I pulled up IRS guidelines for offshore income reporting. The penalties for willful tax evasion on this scale could be severe. Prison time, massive fines, complete financial ruin. The net was tightening. Thursday morning, I met Gerald at his office again. He looked tired, older than he had at our first meeting, the weight of betrayal and necessary action aging him visibly. "I've reviewed the trust documents," he said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. "You were right. Diane has been diverting funds. Marcus should have received approximately $800,000 in distributions over the past 3 years. He's received less than half that amount. Where did the rest go? Various administrative expenses and trust management fees, all paid to companies that, when traced, lead back to Diane's network of shells." I opened the folder, scanning the financial statements. The theft wasn't even clever. She'd simply created fake expense categories and paid herself through her own companies, as if she'd grown so confident in her untouchability that she'd stopped bothering to hide. "We need to move faster," I said. "She's getting bolder. These recent transactions are barely concealed. If she realizes we're looking, she'll start covering her tracks more carefully." "How much longer until you're ready to present to the board?" I pulled up my master file on my tablet. I have 47 instances of corporate fraud documented, 19 million in traced stolen funds, 4 innocent people who were framed to cover her crimes, and now evidence she's been stealing from her own son's inheritance while evading federal taxes. If I had another week, I could probably find more. But we have enough now to guarantee conviction. Gerald stood, walking to his window with the $1 million view. "Martin Hughes can meet with us Monday morning, early, before Diane arrives at the office." "And if he agrees the evidence supports action?" "Then we approach Sarah Lancaster and Robert Chen. If we can secure 3 board votes, we can suspend Diane immediately, pending a full investigation. Once she's suspended, we report everything to the SEC and federal prosecutors. She'll fight," I warned. "She'll claim this is personal, that I'm biased against her, that this is revenge for how she treated me. Let her claim whatever she wants. The evidence speaks for itself." Gerald turned back from the window, his expression hardening. "Diane Rothschild has spent 5 years stealing from this company. She's destroyed innocent lives to protect herself. She's stolen from her own son's inheritance. And she's done it all while playing the grieving widow and devoted mother. It's time she faced consequences." I gathered my materials. "I'll have everything organized and ready for Monday morning. Complete case file, supporting documentation, recommendations for next steps. Ms. Chen." Gerald stopped me at the door. "When this goes public, and it will go public, Diane will make you the villain of her story. She'll tell everyone you targeted her out of spite, that you manipulated the evidence, that you turned her son against her. Are you prepared for that narrative? I thought about all the times Diane had called me not good enough. About the whispered assessments at my wedding reception. About the way she'd tried to make me feel small and wrong and inferior. Let her tell whatever story she wants, I said. I have the evidence. And evidence doesn't lie. That evening, I sat Marcus down in our living room. He knew immediately something was wrong from my expression. What is it? What happened? I need to tell you something, I began carefully. And I need you to listen all the way through before you react. His face paled. Are you pregnant? No, nothing like that. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. You know how Gerald asked me to do some compliance work for Rothschild Capital? Yeah? It's more than compliance work, Marcus. It's an investigation into financial irregularities at the firm. He relaxed slightly. Okay, that makes sense. Gerald's always been meticulous about that stuff. But why do you look so worried? Because the irregularities are serious, and they're connected to someone in a position of authority at the firm. I watched him process this, saw the moment understanding began to dawn. Who? Marcus, who? His voice was harder now, defensive. Your mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood up, paced to the window, turned back. No way. You're telling me Gerald thinks my mother is doing something wrong? I'm telling you, I've found evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. And it's not just Gerald. I've been building this case for almost 2 weeks now. I've traced stolen funds through shell companies to offshore accounts. I've documented millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions. I've found evidence she framed other employees to cover her crimes. This is insane. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. This is my mother we're talking about. She's COO of a major investment firm. She's respected in the industry. She couldn't. I have bank records, Marcus. Financial statements. Property deeds purchased with stolen money. Tax returns that don't match offshore income. I have everything documented, and I've spent the last 2 weeks triple-checking every detail because I knew how devastating this would be. He stared at me like I was a stranger. You've been investigating my mother behind my back for 2 weeks? Since when? Since the wedding? Since Gerald contacted me at the wedding reception, yes. And you didn't think to tell me? To maybe mention that someone was accusing my mother of crimes? I couldn't. The investigation required complete confidentiality. If word got out before we had everything documented. If word got out? Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. I'm her son. I'm your husband. And you didn't think I deserved to know? You're also CFO of the company she's been stealing from. You're a witness whether you want to be or not. Telling you earlier would have compromised. Compromised what? Your case? Your investigation? God, Vanessa, listen to yourself. This is my mother, my family. And you've been building a case against her like she's some criminal you don't know. She is a criminal, I said quietly. The evidence proves it. Evidence you collected while lying to me every day for 2 weeks. While we had dinner together and you smiled and acted normal, and the whole time you were secretly destroying my mother's life. The accusation hurt more than I'd expected. I'm not destroying anything. I'm documenting crimes that already happened. Holding someone accountable for systematic theft and fraud. Someone. You mean my mother? The woman who raised me. Who's been through hell since my dad died. Who's been working her ass off to keep the company my father built running successfully. That's who you've decided is a criminal? I pulled out my tablet, opened the evidence file. Marcus, please. Just look at this. Look at the transactions. The shell companies. The offshore accounts. You're CFO. You know what these patterns mean. He held up his hand, refusing to look. I don't want to see your evidence. I don't want to see whatever story you've constructed to justify this witch hunt. It's not a story. It's documented fact. Bank records don't lie. Property deeds don't lie. Corporate filings don't lie. But you do, apparently. His eyes were cold now, distant. You lied to me for 2 weeks. Every morning when I asked about your day. Every evening when we had dinner. Every night when we went to bed. You lied! I had to! The investigation. Stop calling it an investigation. Marcus's voice rose, anger breaking through the shock. Stop making this sound professional and necessary. This is you going after my mother because she wasn't nice enough to you at our wedding. This is revenge dressed up in legal language. The accusation hit like a slap. That's not true. That's not what this is about, isn't it? She criticized you. She made it clear she didn't approve of our marriage. And now suddenly you've discovered she's a criminal? That's one hell of a coincidence. The evidence has nothing to do with her opinion of me. The fraud has been happening for 5 years, since long before we even met. Your father discovered it before he died. That's what Gerald told me. Richard knew, Marcus. He was building his own case when he had his heart attack. That stopped him. My father knew. Gerald found his notes after the funeral. Your dad was investigating the same irregularities. The stress might have contributed to— Don't. Marcus's voice cracked. Don't you dare suggest my mother killed my father. Don't you dare go there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying she was committing fraud while he was alive, and he discovered it, and the stress of that discovery might have affected his health. That's all. That's all? You're casually suggesting my mother might have caused my father's death through criminal activity, and you think that's not a huge accusation? I stood up, trying to approach him, but he stepped back. Marcus, please. I know this is devastating. I know you don't want it to be true, but denying it doesn't change the facts. Your mother has been systematically stealing from the company. She's framed innocent people. She's been diverting money from your father's trust. From your inheritance? My inheritance? He laughed again, hollow. Now you're going to tell me she's been stealing from me too? Is there anything you haven't accused her of? I'm not accusing. I'm presenting evidence that will be reviewed by the board of directors on Monday morning. Evidence that will likely be turned over to federal prosecutors. This is happening, Marcus. Whether you believe me or not, this is happening. You're presenting evidence to the board. On Monday. He said it slowly, processing. You mean you're going forward with this? Even though I'm asking you not to. Even though I'm telling you this will destroy my family. Your family's already been destroyed by what your mother did. I'm just bringing it to light. No. Marcus grabbed his jacket from the chair. No, you're choosing your investigation over my family. You're choosing Gerald Whitmore over me. You're choosing revenge over our marriage. Marcus, wait. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you right now. He headed for the door. Where are you going? To my mother's. To warn her that my wife has been building a case against her for 2 weeks. To give her a chance to defend herself against whatever lies you've constructed. My heart sank. If you tell her, she'll start covering her tracks. She'll destroy evidence. Good, Marcus said coldly. She should know what's coming. She should have a chance to protect herself. That's what family does, Vanessa. We protect each other, something you clearly don't understand. The door slammed behind him, and I stood alone in our apartment. My tablet still clutched in my hand with all the evidence Marcus had refused to look at. I called Gerald immediately. We have a problem. Marcus is on his way to warn Diane, I told Gerald, my voice tight with controlled panic. We need to move now. Gerald was silent for 3 seconds that felt like hours. How much time do we have? 30 minutes. Maybe less if traffic's light. I was already grabbing my laptop, shoving documents into my bag. If she starts destroying evidence, she won't have time, Gerald interrupted, his voice suddenly commanding. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Right now. All members. Non-negotiable attendance. Can you be at my office in 20 minutes? I'll be there in 15. The taxi ride through Manhattan felt surreal. Outside, the city continued its normal Thursday evening rhythm. Inside, I was reviewing years of evidence on my tablet, preparing to present a case that would destroy my husband's family while he raced to protect them. Gerald's office was blazing with light when I arrived. He stood at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his expression granite hard. Sarah, I don't care if you're at the opera. This is an emergency board meeting. You have 30 minutes to get here or you forfeit your vote. He hung up, immediately dialing another number. Martin, Gerald Whitmore. I'm invoking emergency protocol under Section 12 of the board bylaws. Yes, tonight. No, it cannot wait. 45 minutes. My office. Robert Chen? I asked, already on his way. He was in the city for dinner. Gerald pulled out a bottle of scotch, poured himself 2 fingers, then reconsidered and poured 3. This is going to be the longest night of your life, Ms. Chen. Are you ready? I thought about Marcus, probably pulling up to his mother's building right now. About Diane, who would hear her son's warning and know exactly what was coming. About the marriage I might be ending by choosing truth over loyalty. I'm ready. The board members arrived within the hour, their expressions ranging from confused to annoyed to concerned. Martin Hughes, the retired federal judge, was last to arrive, his white hair disheveled from the rush. "This better be good, Gerald," he said, taking his seat. "I left a 50th anniversary dinner for this?" "It's not good," Gerald replied. "It's necessary." Sarah Lancaster, the former prosecutor, studied me with sharp eyes. "And she is?" "Vanessa Chen, corporate attorney with Harrington and Associates, Marcus Rothschild's wife, and as of 2 weeks ago, our special investigator into financial irregularities at this firm." Robert Chen leaned forward. "What kind of irregularities?" I stood, connecting my laptop to the conference room display. "Systematic embezzlement, tax fraud, witness tampering, and breach of fiduciary duty, all committed by your COO, Diane Rothschild, over the past 5 years. For the next hour, I walked them through everything. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the framed employees, the stolen inheritance. With each slide, each document, each trace transaction, I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to shock to anger. "This is $47 million, Martin Hughes said, his voice hollow. "She's stolen $47 million? "That we've found so far," I confirmed. "There may be more, and Richard knew." Sarah Lancaster's question was directed at Gerald. He nodded heavily. "I found his investigation notes after he died. I should have acted then. Instead, I gave Diane 5 more years to continue her crimes. That's on me." "Where is Diane now?" Robert Chen asked. As if in answer, my phone buzzed. "A text from Marcus. At Mom's, told her everything. She says you're lying. Says she can prove it. We're coming to Gerald's office." I showed the message to Gerald. He smiled grimly. "Good. Let her try." 20 minutes later, Diane Rothschild swept into the conference room with Marcus at her side. She looked immaculate as always, her silver hair perfectly styled, her Armani suit without a wrinkle. But her eyes were hard, calculating. "Gerald. Board members." She nodded to each of them, then turned to me. "And my daughter-in-law, who apparently has been conducting a secret investigation into my work." "How charming." "Sit down, Diane," Gerald said. "I'll stand, thank you. This shouldn't take long. Whatever Vanessa has told you is based on misunderstanding at best, malicious fabrication at worst. She's angry because I wasn't enthusiastic about her marriage to my son. This is revenge dressed up as investigation, is it?" Martin Hughes pulled up one of my documents on his tablet. Then explained Premier Advisory. Group. The shell company registered to Patricia. Morrison, your maiden name, that billed us $2.3 million for consulting services that never occurred. Diane's composure cracked slightly. Those were legitimate consulting fees. "For a company that doesn't exist," Sarah Lancaster interrupted. "That has no employees, no office, no website, no track record. A company whose only purpose seems to be funneling Rothschild Capital's money into your personal accounts." "I can explain every transaction," Diane insisted. But her voice had lost its certainty. "Then explain Thomas Anderson," I said quietly. "The comptroller you framed 3 years ago for embezzlement. The man who went to prison for crimes you committed." Marcus had been silent until now, standing beside his mother like a protective wall. But at Anderson's name, he flinched. "Mom? That's not true, right?" "Tell them that's not true." Diane's mask slipped further. "Thomas Anderson was guilty. The evidence was fabricated by employees who reported to you," I continued. "I've reviewed the original investigation. The transactions used to prove his guilt? They all trace back to accounts you controlled. You set him up, let him take the fall, and continued stealing while everyone thought the problem was solved." "You have no proof of that," Diane said. But her hands were trembling now. I pulled up another document. I have Anderson's original defense filing. He claimed someone used his credentials to make unauthorized transactions. The investigating team dismissed it as a desperate lie. But when I examined the server logs, I found something interesting. Those transactions were made from an IP address registered to your home office, Diane, on days when Anderson was verified to be on vacation. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus stared at his mother, his face pale. "Mom?" His voice cracked. "Tell me she's wrong. Please tell me she's wrong." Diane opened her mouth, closed it. Her perfect composure was crumbling like a building in an earthquake. "You don't understand. After your father died, I had expenses. Maintaining our lifestyle, the reputation, everything he built it," Marcus said softly. "Not you. And you stole it. You stole from his company. You stole from me. You destroyed innocent people to cover your crimes. I protected us," Diane snapped, her desperation breaking through. "I protected this family. Everything I did was to maintain the position your father worked for. To give you the life you deserved. By stealing millions?" Gerald's voice was ice. "By framing employees? By betraying every principle Richard stood for?" Robert Chen stood. "I've seen enough. I move for immediate termination of Diane Rothschild as COO, effective immediately. All access to company systems revoked. And I move we report these findings to federal prosecutors." "Seconded," Sarah Lancaster said. "Third," Martin Hughes added, his retired judge's face stern with judgment. Gerald looked at Diane. "You have the right to defend yourself at a formal hearing. But as of this moment, you're suspended from all duties pending investigation. Security will escort you from the building." Diane's composure shattered completely. She turned to Marcus, reaching for him. "Darling, please. You believe me, don't you? She's turned you against me. This is all her manipulation." Marcus stepped back from her touch. "I read the documents on the way here, Mom. While you were telling me how Vanessa was lying, I was looking at bank records that don't lie. Property deeds that don't lie. Transaction logs that don't lie." His eyes were wet. "How could you? How could you steal from Dad's legacy? How could you frame innocent people? How could you take money from my inheritance while pretending to protect me? I did it for you?" "No." His voice was firm now. "You did it for yourself. And you let me believe Vanessa was the problem, that she wasn't good enough for our family. When all along, you were the one who wasn't good enough." Security arrived then, 2 professional men in suits who waited at the door. Diane looked around the room one last time, searching for an ally. Finding none. "This isn't over," she said, her voice cold again. "I'll fight this. I'll prove she manipulated the evidence. I'll prove this was personal revenge." "Please do," Gerald said quietly. "We've already made copies of everything for federal prosecutors. Fight all you want, Diane. The evidence speaks for itself." They led her out. Through the glass walls, I watched her perfect posture finally break, her shoulders sagging as the full weight of her exposure crushed her. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the conference room. The board members quietly gathered their things and left, giving us privacy. Gerald paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said to Marcus, "your father would be proud of you. And proud of your wife for having the courage to do what he started. Then we were alone, Marcus and me, and the ruins of his family's reputation." "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I know you didn't want to believe it. I know this destroys everything you thought you knew about your mother." "She told me you weren't good enough," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "At our engagement dinner, she pulled me aside and said you weren't suitable for our family, that you were too ambitious, too driven, too different from us. She said you'd never understand our world, Marcus." She was right in a way. I don't understand your world. A world where you do the right thing even when it hurts, even when it costs you everything, even when the person you love is begging you to stop. He finally looked at me. "I told you this was revenge, that you were going after her because she wasn't nice to you. You were scared. You were protecting your mother. I was wrong." He moved to the window, looking out at the city. "When I was driving to her apartment, I kept telling myself you'd manipulated everything, that you'd twisted evidence to make her look guilty. But then I started really looking at the documents you sent, the bank records, the shell companies, And I realized something. What? You didn't just build a case against my mother. You built a case that would hold up in federal court. That would protect every innocent person she'd hurt. That would restore Dad's legacy instead of letting her corrupt it further. You did exactly what a good attorney would do. What a good person would do. He turned back to me. What I should have done if I'd had the courage. I moved to stand beside him. You're not responsible for your mother's choices. No, but I'm responsible for mine. And I chose wrong tonight. I chose protecting someone who didn't deserve protection over believing someone who's never given me reason to doubt her. His hand found mine. I'm sorry. For not trusting you. For not even looking at your evidence. For accusing you of lying when all you were doing was your job. I should have told you sooner. Found a way to— No, Gerald was right. I'm CFO. I'm a material witness. Telling me earlier would have compromised everything. You made the hard choice. The right choice. Even knowing I might hate you for it, he squeezed my hand. I don't hate you. I'm terrified of what comes next. I'm devastated about my mother. But I don't hate you. What does come next? Federal investigation. Criminal trial, probably. Civil suits from the people she framed. The company's reputation taking a massive hit. He laughed bitterly. And somewhere in all that, I need to figure out how to be Marcus Rothschild when Diane Rothschild's crimes are national news. You're not your mother, I said firmly. You're Richard's son. The man who built this company on integrity. The man who was trying to stop the fraud when he died. That's your legacy, not hers. We stood together at the window as dawn began to break over Manhattan. Somewhere below, Diane was probably already calling lawyers. Reporters would soon be circling. The company would face months of investigations and restructuring. But for now, in Gerald's office with evidence scattered across the conference table, Marcus and I held each other and watched the sun rise on a very different future than either of us had imagined at our wedding reception 3 weeks ago. She said you weren't good enough, Marcus said softly. Turns out you were the only one good enough to do what needed to be done. I didn't respond. Just held my husband while he grieved the mother he thought he knew and began to understand the wife he'd almost lost by not believing. Outside, the city awakened to another day. Inside, a family began the long process of healing from betrayal and learning that sometimes love means holding people accountable, even when it breaks your heart to do it, especially then. 6 months later, I stood in federal court watching Diane Rothschild plead guilty to 17 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Thomas Anderson sat in the gallery, vindicated at last. The 3 other employees she'd framed had already received settlements and public apologies. Marcus sat beside me, his hand in mine. We'd spent the intervening months in therapy, rebuilding trust, learning how to be married in the aftermath of devastating truth. It hadn't been easy. Some days it still wasn't, but we were still here. Still choosing each other, still building something honest from the ruins of his family's lies. As the judge sentenced Diane to 7 years in federal prison, Marcus's grip on my hand tightened. I squeezed back a silent message. I'm here. We're okay. We'll survive this. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Gerald Whitmore gave a brief statement about Rothschild Capital's commitment to ethical business practices and supporting the victims of Diane's crimes. Marcus declined to comment. We walked to the car together, leaving the chaos behind. You okay? I asked as we drove away. No, Marcus said honestly. But I will be. We will be. And somehow, despite everything, I believed him. Because the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living in someone else's lie. Even when that someone is family. Even when the cost is everything you thought you knew, especially then. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.